No country has ever taxed its way to prosperity. And so you have this great manufacturing center. Slovakia has been a global leader in automobile production. You've done some nuclear power plants here. But I think the government should be focusing on trying to get tax rates such as they have in Switzerland. I think in terms of U.S. policy, I will make a prediction. I think our Supreme Court is going to rule invalid the tariffs that President Trump has put in by executive order. Good things are coming if we just make a few changes.
Vstúpte s nami do zákulisia, kde sa bežní ľudia nedostanú. A sledujte hru mocných zblízka.
Som Lucia Okšová, šéf-redaktorka Forbesu. A toto sú
Power Players.
Dear Mr. Forbes, welcome to Slovakia and welcome to our Forbes Power Players podcast. It's such a pleasure to be with you today.
Great pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Podcast Power Players počúvate vďaka nášmu partnerovi Sandberg Capital, váš partner vo svete private equity.
Especially in these times when clarity that Forbes, the name and the media it embodies, provides is so much needed. So thank you.
No.
In the introduction for this podcast, I stated that you are visiting Slovakia during quite turbulent times. I'll make just a quick summary so that we'll know where we are. Donald Trump, after the first year of the second term, is unsettling not only the markets, but also NATO. After the kidnapping of Venezuelan President Maduro, he shocked Europe with imperialist efforts to take over Greenland. Ukraine is entering its fourth year of resistance against Russian aggression, and the world is being fundamentally changed by the artificial intelligence revolution. Armament has become as important as accumulation of energy resources, and Europe has woken up for the first time since the Draghi Report and is intensively addressing its competitiveness vis-à-vis China. So this is where we are right now. We are meeting a few days after the meeting, the World Economic Forum in Davos. And then when I watched some of the videos from Davos and some of the addresses of the states' leaders, what struck me was that the overall mood wasn't optimistic, nor it was panicking. It was rather realistic, as if a sudden awakening to a completely new world. So my first question is, are we living through a permanent reset of the global economic and political order, or is this just temporary?
I think what we're seeing is changes in terms of government policies that will hopefully enable economies to grow the way they should. As you know, in the last 20 years, the EU as a whole has lagged behind the United States, which is, and that is because of, let's be blunt, self-inflicted government wounds, high taxes, unnecessary regulation. The amount of spending done on renewables, what should have been done instead of these windmills and solar panels, what should have been emphasized was getting cheap natural gas from the United States, and very importantly, nuclear power. You don't get emissions from nuclear power. Natural gas is a very clean fuel. So a lot of resources were wasted on something that could have been done much better in terms of fighting emissions than the path they took. So in terms of, let's talk about Slovakia. About over 20 years ago, Slovakia put in a flat tax, 19% on incomes, 19% business, 19% VAT. The growth rates, especially in the early 2000s, was very good. Then the country raised rates. As you know, the current government now wants to have two new brackets, 30%, 35%. It has been raising the corporate tax as high as 24%. Your Social Security taxes are way too high, and your VAT is going up at a time when you should be going in the opposite direction. No country has ever taxed its way to prosperity. And so you have this great manufacturing center. Slovakia has been a global leader in automobile production. You've done some nuclear power plants here. But I think the government should be focusing on trying to get tax rates such as they have in Switzerland. Most of the cantons in Switzerland, many of them have single-digit tax rates. So Switzerland's growth rates over the years has been much better than Slovakia's and the EU as a whole. There are some exceptions in the EU. The Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, have done well. Since the fall of communism in the old Soviet Union, Poland has done very well. They made some very real reforms and have done better than Europe as a whole. But you look at the growth rates in Germany, which affects Slovakia and the Czech Republic very severely, has been stagnant. France has been stagnant. Britain has been stagnant. So the focus should be moving ahead, figuring out how do you remove the obstacles to growth. One of them is reducing tax rates. Another is having a more realistic energy policy. I mean, the electricity rates in Germany, for example, are almost 3 times what they are in the United States. So intelligence, AI investing, which requires a lot of energy, you're not getting very much because your energy is too expensive. So this is making the EU much less competitive. And so in terms of moving ahead, Europe is going to be spending more on armaments. We're spending more on armaments, sadly, because of Russia and China, and to a lesser extent North Korea. But that doesn't mean we're going to have to be very cooperative. I think in terms of U.S. policy, I will make a prediction. I think our Supreme Court is going to rule invalid the tariffs that President Trump has put in by executive order.
And what would that mean? What would that mean for Europe?
What that would mean is the tariffs that were applied without congressional approval will be null and void. No tariffs. Tariffs would have to be passed by Congress or by another legislative means, but no longer will the president be able to put them on just by signing a piece of paper. He has to go through a legislative process.
So what was the point, if this is the result, probably, this is your prediction, what was the point of the last year's turbulence and geopolitical...
Well, he felt, and a lot of others felt, that he had the authority to impose those tariffs. He thinks they help reduce trade imbalances and bring investment in the U.S. So I think going forward, we'll have a much more stable tariff environment, which will be good, especially for Slovakia, because you export, obviously, automobiles, and this will help open up the U.S. market. I think, too, looking ahead, I think you're going to see a much more realistic policies in Europe about energy policies. One of the things that's going to be done away with, they've just started here, is doing away with the mandate of a 2035 no more internal combustion engines. Ridiculous, undoable, and not going to work. So the quicker they move away from these mandates that hurt economic growth, the better. There's no reason that Europe shouldn't have the growth rates they used to have. The divergence between the U.S. and the EU have gotten worse in the last 20 years. And that was because of policy mistakes. The good thing about a mistake is you can correct it. And that's what I'm looking forward to in Slovakia and the Czech Republic, more of a Swiss approach to taxation rather than thinking raising rates is the way to go.
Does it mean that Europe woke up to a completely new world, or that
they woke up to a world where they could no longer, I'll use the word coast, on the assumption that growth would come automatically, even if you didn't have the right environment, that you could continue to spend a lot of money on so-called renewables without consequences. The consequences are now apparent. Why is it in Germany, electricity prices, both for homes and for industry, are almost 2.5, 3 times what they are in the United States, which is why German manufacturing companies are setting up facilities in the U.S. because the energy is so artificially expensive. Well, so Europe was on a path that was unsustainable. Now, hopefully, as reality sets in, there will be a better approach, and I'm hoping that there'll be countries in the EU. I would love to have it Slovakia go back to where you were with the flat tax, and remove barriers to business rather than increasing barriers to business, and so that way people's energies can be done on producing things rather than complying with paperwork from the government and from Brussels. So we know, experience shows, hundreds of years, if you have low tax rates, stable currency, you will do well. Obviously, there are other factors, but those are 2 basic ones. And one of the things that we're going to have to cope with in the next year because of all the debt we took on with the zero interest rates is currency crisis. The euro is weak, the pound is weak, the yen is very weak. That's a very terrible situation. The dollar is weak. Look at the gold price, $5,000 an ounce. That is always a red light flashing. When the gold price goes up, you're going to have a troubled currency. So central banks are going to have to learn prosperity does not cause inflation, that the only way you cope with the burdens you have is with economic growth, not regulation and taxation.
I will get to Slovakia shortly, and I think that there is a lot to discuss here. Of course, you yourself said that Slovakia is or was in the past the heaven for investors, the Tatra Tiger.
Well, you look at it, you bring up a good point. Foreign direct investment, it's dried up. Used to be a magnet for foreign direct investment, Slovakia.
It's not that way these days, and we'll get into that shortly. But I want to come back to the geopolitical tension right now. And I simply want to understand your point of view on whether what is happening these days, what is happening in the world with Donald Trump, with Venezuela, Greenland. We don't need to get into the detail. I just want to understand whether it's destabilizing the geopolitical rule, whether the world has become more transactional rather than based on values and long-term partnerships and ideology, and whether this is a historical moment.
So what you're having is, first with Venezuela, we had a dictator there who was very big in the drug business, and what happened to Maduro was not without precedent. President George H.W. Bush in the early 1990s removed a drug lord who headed up the Panamanian government, brought him to the U.S., tried him, and he served time in prison. So we've had to do that before with drug lords. The Greenland thing, I believe we could have, will get a good agreement with Denmark and Greenland without all this kerfuffle about taking over Greenland. It's got in the way of the real task at hand. And the key thing is NATO has to be recognized here and in the United States as very critical for a safe world. We know Putin has imperial ambitions. He is ready to pounce on the Baltic states. He wants to take them back. And we know China is very aggressive in the South China Sea and elsewhere. So we have to counter that to have a world in which we can have commerce. One of the policies of the U.S. for over 200 years has been what we call freedom of navigation, that international waters are free. Anyone can use them if you're not unlawful. And China's trying to challenge that in a critical way. So the world is changing in the sense that Europe has got to get back in a growth mode. Europe has got to do more on defense, where history did not end with the end of the Cold War. And the U.S., I think most parties in the U.S. recognize the importance of NATO. NATO is the most successful alliance ever. It enabled us to win the Cold War and can enable us to secure you don't have to make Ukraine a member of NATO, but you have to have in the settlement troops, military forces, I'm being candid here, from other countries, so that Russia knows if they try to resume the war, they're going to be in a conflict with other countries. That's how we kept the peace in Europe. The Soviet Union knew that if it moved in Germany, there'd be not just the U.S. or Germany, but a dozen other nations, more than a dozen other nations in the war against them. And same thing in the Korean Peninsula. The stationing of our troops in the Korean Peninsula is the only reason North Korea hasn't attacked the South again. So we do live in a more unstable world because of the ambitions of Russia and China. We've made huge mistakes in allocation of resources in terms of energy. We could have done that in a much more constructive way. And by the way, as I mentioned to some people here, one of the big industries in the future coming is nuclear plants, not the big ones that we're accustomed to, but very small ones, no bigger than an Apple, look like an Apple store, what they call small modules, that I think in the next 10 years you're going to see more of. After all, we have nuclear-powered submarines, nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. You can have small modules that can provide ever cheaper fuel, energy, and no emissions. And in terms of spent fuels, which is the challenge of these bigger ones, the smaller ones will use pellets, recycled pellets from the bigger plants. So the challenges we face are we can overturn them, but we don't have to take over Greenland. We don't have to throw spitballs, as we say, against each other. But we do have to recognize the threat from Putin, the need to give more armaments to Ukraine. They're willing to do the fighting, give them the armaments, give them the means to fight. This war should not have lasted more than a year if we'd given them what they needed at the beginning. Those Russian invaders could have been pushed back, but that was not done. Even now, Europe is not giving access by Ukraine to the $300 billion of Russian assets that are frozen. Unfreeze them.
There is at least the loan of 90 billion, but
let's do it the right way. And so Ukraine, we can end this war, which will end when Putin has the bitter conclusion he can't win a war by attrition. If you push those Russian forces back, then they realize they aren't going to win a war of attrition. That's when you'll get a real settlement.
All of this makes Slovakia a very, I think, looked at economy, a frontline economy, one way or another, whether
Yes.
Ukraine will become a member state of EU and NATO or not. Slovakia will be on the front line.
The thing is, this is where we shouldn't get caught up on things. Ukraine does not have to be a member of NATO. All you have to do is have troops stationed in Ukraine. In terms of the EU, Ukraine can follow the Swiss example, or Norway. You can have very close relations with the EU, lots of trade, growing trade with the EU, without being a formal member of the EU. So there are ways to get the job done without getting caught up on formalities.
Okay. What struck me from the Davos speech of the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, was her comparison that today's world and today's situation, of course, the challenges that you mentioned, are opportunities for Europe as well, as you said yourself. And she compared today's situation to 1970s and the collapse of the Bretton Woods system, which basically allowed Europe to create a European Monetary Union, and it basically the distribution or the collapse of basic supply chain, supply routes, the energy crisis, the inflation, everything led also conclusively to the formation of the EMU within Europe, in the European context. Could this comparison work for you?
Well, the collapse of Bretton Woods was a huge mistake by the United States going off the gold standard. Bretton Woods was a form of a gold standard and led to a terrible decade of inflation. And that's why the euro was created. You could not, under Bretton Woods, currencies were fixed. When the Bretton Woods system collapsed, they started all float against each other. Well, in Europe, where there's so much intercontinental trade, this became untenable. So they, and as a defensive response, they created the euro. And a Canadian economist named Robert Mundell got the Nobel Prize. He was sort of the father of the euro, seeing it as a way of getting stable rates. He thought that would lead to both the euro and the dollar to become stronger. He did not realize sometimes governments will go for the lower end instead of the stable end. But the fact of the matter is the euro was indeed, as you say, a response to the collapse of Bretton Woods. But I'll make another prediction, and that is in the next decade, because of the monetary disturbances that we're starting to see now, I think we'll have a new type of Bretton Woods system where we'll have fixed exchange rates again. So we don't have this crazy situation today. Do you realize on a daily basis the amount of trading in currencies is the last number I saw was $6.6 trillion of trading a day. Under Bretton Woods, it was just about zero because you didn't have these fluctuations. So that kind of stability will be good. Without stable currencies, you will have economic turbulence. So I think we'll eventually get back to a stable currency system, but we'll have to go through more trouble before our authorities wake up to the need to do something they had done in the past, having stable currency rates. And so in that sense, I see a good land ahead, even if we have choppy waters before we get to the shores.
So this is when gold comes into the picture again,
yes,
with the price of $5,000 per ounce?
Well, who knows what it'll be when they finally come up with a new system. But when you see gold moving up, you see silver moving up, you see palladium moving up, copper's reaching new highs. Oil has been an exception, but eventually I think that's going to move up. And the amazing thing is about central bankers, whether it's our Federal Reserve or your European Central Bank, is they very rarely mention currency stability. And it's astonishing. The very definition of inflation is a currency going down in value. And that's what we're seeing in the world today. Money measures value. Imagine if the EU, imagine if the European Central Bank and the Federal Reserve were in charge of the Time Bureau. And so you had a floating hour, 60 minutes an hour one day, 48 the next, 20. You know it would be chaotic. Well, when you have the measuring stick of value in the marketplace fluctuating, you buy a kilo of cheese, you expect it to be the same each day. You don't have to worry how much is a kilo going to get me one day to the next day. It's fixed. Same thing has to be done in currencies. So for a variety of reasons, when you fix the gold, it doesn't restrict money supply. It just means it's like a yardstick. It's fixed measure. And when you have that, then you get much more productive investment. Life becomes a lot easier and a lot less unstable.
Bold prediction, but as you said, it might get worse before it gets better. So how can we withstand the bad weather, especially here in Europe and in Slovakia?
I think you have to ask yourself, if I see turbulence ahead, what in my particular business should I do in terms of cash, in terms of hedging, and then start asking political leaders the question, why should these measures of value fluctuate? And start putting political pressure. This is all unnecessary, this kind of turbulence. And Bretton Woods was broken up because of mistaken thinking, not because it was forced to be done. They didn't know what they were doing.
Europe is right now trying to broker new deals at a very high speed with other allies than the US. For instance, Europe finalized the Mercosur deal after 25 years,
Yes.
whatever that means. And Ursula von der Leyen announced mother of all deals to be made with India. What does this tell you about?
I think what this tells us is that we should get back to where we were 20 years ago, and that is making agreements to reduce trade barriers, do more free trade agreements. Since World War II, the U.S. and other countries, for the most part, worked to reduce trade barriers. And that led to an explosion of global trade, that and the invention of what they call the box containers, which reduced shipping costs 90 to 95%. You know, before containers, you had to physically put things on the ship, physically take them off. A lot of stealing, a lot of breakage, and so the box, between 1985 and 2005, thanks to the box and the development of container ports, global trade quadrupled, and we need to do that again. So I'm all for any deals you want to cut with the Latins. Especially getting a deal on agriculture. I hope that lasts, because that was a big sticking point for 25 years between those countries and the EU. All the better. And hopefully the U.S. will get back in a mode of trying to come to free trade agreements, reducing barriers. And that way we can grow. Taxes, what our policymakers don't understand, taxes are what I call a wedge, a barrier. Let's be simple. Let's say you want to buy an item for 100 euros. This is a hypothetical example. Let's say you earn 20 euros an hour and there are no taxes. You have to work 5 hours to earn the 100 euros to buy the item, 5 hours of work. Let's say there's a 50% tax. So instead of getting 20 an hour, you only get 10. That means you have to work 10 hours to get that item. So tax is that kind of wedge. You have to work more hours to get an item, more hours to do things. And we need taxes, we do need government, but we've been overdoing it. Too many taxes, too many regulations, standing in the way of people being able to do commerce with one another. So we should know just from experience in the past what works. And we do that again, and Europe can flourish again. The bureaucrats in Brussels, some may become Uber drivers, but I think people give more power to local entrepreneurs, and they will respond.
Podcast Power Players počúvate vďaka nášmu partnerovi Sandberg Capital, váš partner vo svete private equity.
So on the one hand, we have...
And by the way, that does not mean doing away with safety nets. Make another prediction. In the next 10 years, you're going to see a revolution in healthcare. Right now, healthcare is seen as a big, huge expense for governments, for raising taxes for business, becoming more and more expensive. We're going to be going, it'll be very slow at first, to evolving a new system where the patient will control the money, not the government. We'll have systems resembling what they have in Singapore. In Singapore, you get taxed, but the money, the healthcare tax goes to your own account, not to the government. You determine what kind of policy you want. You pick the hospital you want. So in Singapore, they have ads on TV saying our policy is better than that policy, our hospital is better than that policy. And it turns out because of the competition, you get lower prices and better care. Longevity in Singapore is about the highest in the world. Their outcomes in healthcare are one of the best in the world. And their healthcare spend as a percent of GDP is a little more than half of the EU and 1/3 of the US, where we have a very expensive system. So you can get better care, better coverage, no waiting 10 years to get an appointment with a specialist. I exaggerate, but not by much. And so I think you're going to see for entrepreneurs a real revolution in healthcare delivery. So what looks like a hopeless, expensive thing today is going to become a high-tech marvel tomorrow. So again, good things are coming if we just make a few changes.
And of course, that changes and influences the demographics as well.
Yes.
People will live longer. Longevity is a huge boom in the US and in Europe as well. If we can capitalize on that and if we can make smart decisions.
Yes, right now, a lot of experts sort of look at longevity as a crisis. At my age, I don't think it's a crisis. I like it. And so it should be a source of celebration instead of, oh, how can we afford it? We make some basic reforms, and you can have longer life and a better quality of life. For example, robotics. We think of, mechanical robots and the like. But they're developing robots now. It's a bad name, but where they can take a patient out of a bed. Right now, you have to physically, it's very cumbersome and very dangerous. New robots can do it seamlessly, so the patient is not discomforted, and taking care of old people in the home. It sounds science fiction, but some amazing things are coming. And that gets to one other thing. I can't help myself. The whole name of artificial intelligence, that's a bad name. We don't call cars artificial horses. We don't call airplanes artificial birds. And AI, like anything else, can be used for good things and for bad things. But I think it's going to lead in the proper environment to faster development of drugs, faster development of medicines. There's a drug now that's being approved by our government that'll enable you through blood test to see before symptoms show up for 50 different cancers. And we all know the earlier the detection, the better the chance of survival. And so these miraculous things are coming along.
And of course, this poses a challenge for the pension system, especially in Slovakia or countries that are that have their own systems, which, for instance, in Slovakia, people retire at around 60-something years old, which, given the longevity trend, expanding the lifespan.
Well, what you're going to see in the future is instead of retiring at 60 and taking a 30-year vacation, you're going to find people doing another career different. They're not going to sit around twiddling thumbs. That gets boring after a while.
So let's get back to Slovakia as the new possible frontline economy, as we already stated, and let's talk about how the leaders and the business elites can capitalize on this moment, because right now, as you said, Europe is realizing that punishing certain energy sources is not leading us towards prosperity. Europe is realizing that nuclear power might be the answer, and especially the AI revolution needs a lot of power. And Slovakia is quite a nuclear country.
I think the last number I saw was 64%
of the energy mix.
Yeah.
And right now, our Prime Minister was in the US trying to negotiate a deal with Westinghouse about building a new nuclear plant. So what could be the Slovakia's future position in this?
Well, Slovakia should see itself like Switzerland, like Singapore, and that is because of your small size, you have to trade with the rest of the world. and export. You're already doing it as a center of automobile manufacturing, but you're primed to be a major exporter of electricity in the future. And so you find these areas, and in terms of healthcare, there's no reason why Slovakia and the Czech Republic couldn't be a center of international healthcare. We have countries like Singapore, where people go for treatments, and why not here? So I think they instead of trying to figure out how to tax people more, try to start focusing on how do we change the way healthcare is done, and focus on nuclear, but also explore these small nuclear modules as well as the traditional plants. Maybe we can get in the business of the smaller ones. There are several companies in the U.S. just getting started on that, and connect with them. And so you become the energy center, not just with traditional nuclear, but these new forms of a nuclear power generation. And that way you become specialized in a way in which you can prosper because you do it better than anyone else.
So Slovakia is this nuclear power, let's say, or has a lot of energy from the nuclear. Slovakia is highly dependent on automotive industry, but the largest car manufacturer per capita in the world. And Slovakia has a huge history in manufacture, in the industry.
Oh, the Skoda works.
Yes. So how can we use this unique position, not just to become another assembly line where, let's say, chips will be made and we will just produce for the rest of the world? Or would that be such a bad thing?
Well, it's not a bad thing to have something that other people want. Auto manufacturing, we take it for granted, but it's a highly specialized process. And when you start to free up the economy, one of the things Slovakia has done until recently is started to streamline setting up a new business. You should look at Denmark or New Zealand, where you can set up a business in a day, and that helps reduce the informal economy too, make it easy to set up and have low tax rates, and you'll find entrepreneurs coming up with new things. You don't have to rely on the government to come up with the idea. People in their garages will start coming up with ideas. That's the phenomenon you see in the U.S. Nobody planned for Apple. That came out of a garage. Google, 2 graduate students at Stanford. And that's the environment you want to create, where people do it on their own. And it's a marvel what people can come up with that is unplanned. Not to go into history, but that's how we got the Industrial Revolution, was in Britain. They had a much less in the 1700s, late 1600s, much less intrusive government than France, which is very rigidly regulated. And so you had these, what we call tinkerers, people fooling around, trying to figure out how to get coal out of a mine better. That's how we got railroad tracks, fooling around, experimenting, that led to the steam engine. And so you want these kinds of tinkerers out there, the modern ones in the garage, coming up with new things that no one had ever thought of.
On the other hand, some foreign media have been calling Slovakia that we are on the path to becoming Europe's Detroit, possibly with seeing the problems in the automotive industry in Europe, with problems with the German economy. Slovakia's economy is heavily reliant on export towards Germany and the rest of the world. How can we use this position of assembly lines and manufacturing skills that are in Slovakia, but to shift them towards a higher value production?
Well, people are going to still want automobiles, and having, for example, in the United States, everyone talks about Detroit. That is what you might call legacy manufacturing. But in other parts of the U.S., There's a very vibrant auto manufacturing industry in states like Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, that turn out cars much more cheaply than Detroit, much more effectively, productively than Detroit. Got to the point where companies like BMW were exporting cars made in South Carolina to other countries. So you should just be having companies figuring out how do we make more advanced automobiles. And you look at an automobile today and compare it to 20 or 30 years ago, very different machine. So improve what you have, and in terms of those skills, you have a workforce that as you develop other things with AI that we can't even imagine today, they have the skills they can apply there. So again, we should be focusing on trade agreements to get rid of these tariffs and other trade barriers so that you have an export market. Germany, you got to encourage, as well as your own government doing the same thing, to reduce taxes and stop this policy of having electricity cost 3 to 4 times what it should cost. And Germany deindustrialized itself, which is bizarre. So you can't do it all by yourself, but you can set an example for others. And urge your neighbors to get your act together, get rid of this 30-35% stuff and this other stuff, and then work on others to do the same thing. Countries should imitate Poland. Forget the change in governments you get, but since the fall of the Berlin Wall, starting in the mid-1990s, Poland became a very real success story. If you don't like Europeans, another one that has been an amazing success story is Vietnam. In the late 1980s, Vietnam was the poorest country in the world, poorer than Haiti. Today it has become a big exporter. It is a middle-income country and achieved great growth rates, again, by removing barriers. So the key thing is, what government should do each day is, what is standing in the way of people doing better things and removing those things. Again, it doesn't mean you get rid of laws. It just means you unnecessary barriers, get them out of the way. If you have an obstacle in the road, remove it.
You mentioned Poland. The comparison between Slovakia and Poland is shocking to some people here in Slovakia. In the past, we were calling ourselves the Tatra Tiger. Right
yes.
now,
when you had a flat tax, yes.
Yes, Poland has exceeded the growth. Poland is the success story of Central Europe and Europe, maybe in general, given the growth rates. It's growing faster than the rest of the Western Europe. Where do you see the roots of the success? Is it the early acknowledgement, for instance, of defense and investment into defense?
No, defense is something you do because you're in a rough neighborhood. And with our friends in Russia, I put quotation marks around friends, you're in a rough neighborhood, so you have to do that. No, what Poland started to do in the mid-1990s was they first had a very major privatization program. They allowed the setup of capital markets in Warsaw. They had more sensible tax policies. They made some mistakes along the way, you always do, but they tried to create an environment where it was attractive to foreign capital and where entrepreneurs had a chance to rise up, like what Vietnam did. And so it's not one particular industry. It's creating an environment where people can flourish. But a country that's going in the opposite direction, we've mentioned Germany. The Wall Street Journal had a story about a year and a half ago of some people in Silicon Valley, Germans, who decided, okay, we're going to go back to Germany and set up some high tech companies. Why not? They went back, and after a year, they gave up. They said the regulations, what we had to go through, they went back to Silicon Valley. It was just too difficult. Well, that was government created. And people say, well, you don't have the workforce, you don't have this, you don't have that. But where people create new things, you come up with ways of providing the needs to fulfill them. And so Germany should be at the forefront of high tech. And I know this will be controversial, but I'll say it anyway. Israel, a nation of 9 million, in terms of high tech, is light years ahead of the EU with over 400 million people. They have more companies on NASDAQ, that's our exchange in New York, stock exchange, one of the stock exchanges, NASDAQ, where a lot of tech companies list. They have more companies on NASDAQ, than the US, than the Europeans do. And that's ridiculous, given Europe's culture and education.
Even despite what's happening or what was happening in Israel?
Yes, they developed a high-tech industry, and despite the neighborhood they live in. So why can't? I mean, how many high-tech companies have come out of Europe?
Very few.
Very few, which is ridiculous.
So do you think that Europe is basically losing, or maybe even lost, the software race because of the excess regulation?
The race is always going on. It's unlike a sports match. There's no time, end a game. You go on the podium or not. Economies are always evolving, so you can come in any time and do well. South Korea. In the early 1960s, their per capita income was about less than 50 euros, one of the poorest countries in the world. And they just decided they were going to become a fast-growing country. So they did, for the most part, right things on regulations, taxation, currency, for the most part. Today, they're one of the richest countries in the world, one of the biggest exporters in the world. And so even though the Industrial Revolution began 180 years before the South Koreans decided to become a big economy, they did it. So it's never too late. Just decide to do it and you'll find a way.
Back to the industrialized Europe and back to the manufacturing capabilities that are built and traditionalized here in Europe. In Davos, Jensen Huang said that AI is not just another technology cycle, but a complete platform shift, and that we are entering the largest industrial build-out in decades. Could that be also a tremendous opportunity for the European Union?
You hit it. When something big like that comes along, scrambles everything, players can come in. Things are not established permanently, and that's how I mentioned in the U.S. how the southern states became better auto manufacturers than Detroit. It's never too late, and so yes, AI. Again, if you have an environment where it's easy to set up a business, the government's not your enemy, tax rates are reasonably they're low. And you can rely on the currency, you'll find people doing amazing things, figuring out it's not just enough to invent AI, it's how you apply it. When back in the 70s, when PCs first came along, people wondered, what do you use these things for? Now we can't live without it. Now it's become handhelds, now a virtual supercomputer, which would once have been the size of this room, you now have in your hand. And did people see that 40, 50 years ago? No. So, but people are, again, liberate your garages.
How you apply it and how you power it as well. I think that one of the sentences, I'm not sure right now whether Jensen Huang or Elon Musk said it at Davos, was that soon we will be able to produce more semiconductors and more chips than we will be able to power in the world. So that was quite interesting for me, that we lack the energy infrastructure.
You see, the thing is, if there's a need, people will figure out how to meet it. And one of the things that is stirring is advances going beyond the microchip, where your power needs can be the size of this magazine. It's now in the embryonic stage. So we extrapolate what we need in terms of energy given the way we do things now. But high tech is coming up with ways where you can do more with less energy. And I'm not sure NVIDIA sees that yet, but I think Elon Musk sees it. He won't call it that, but I think he sees, and that's why one of the reasons why people buy Tesla stock is not because it makes EVs, it's because of these other things that are going on. And I think he sees it perhaps more than NVIDIA does, this new, what you might call post-microchip world that is coming along. So as we used to say, stay tuned. Again, big opportunity.
Do you have a prediction regarding AI and its massive influence upon the world and the business?
Well, we know it's going to be massive. We also know that there will be a lot of ups and downs. I mean, in the U.S., we had, I think, over 300 major auto manufacturers over the years. Most don't make it. But again, the market will shake that out. Blockbuster used to be a big dispenser of videos, and then Netflix blew them out of the water. So you don't know how these things are going to evolve in terms of specifics, but you do know that if people are allowed to do it, people are going to keep finding new ways of doing things, new ways of delivering things, and should lead to a higher standard of living. I mean, we live in a troubled world today, but just go back 80 years, who would have imagined in 1945 the standard of living we have now? We take it for granted. But people's ability to take vacations, all the devices we have, would have been unimaginable. And for all the problems it creates, being able to easily cross a border was once unimaginable. War between Germany and France is unimaginable. And who could have predicted that in 1945?
And capital is already flowing at an unprecedented speed towards AI, towards all the
and
big tech companies.
It may be as you get these new post-microchip world, that a lot of that AI energy will be easily consumed, and you may not even need all of it. But we don't know because we don't know the future. So you pilot the best you can. And so crises are opportunities.
Crises are opportunities, but...
I remember, I'm old enough to remember, in the early 1960s, there was a great worry in the U.S. that automation was going to destroy industrial jobs, and we're going to have massive unemployment. Most of the job categories then don't even exist today. We used to have in the U.S. over 400,000 people doing what switches do now. We call them operators. Gone. And yet new jobs, new categories that couldn't have been imagined then.
We've talked a lot about the geopolitics, energy, industry, AI, forces that no company or no country can control on their own. But in the end, the outcome still depends on strategic choices and on responsible leadership that Forbes promotes for more than 100 years. So I have a few final questions for you. And the first one would be, how do you see the future of capitalism? And what is the biggest, what causes the capitalism to suffer the most nowadays? Is it irresponsible leaders or bad policies?
What makes capitalism suffer is people who don't know what capitalism is. Government-run economies or over-regulated economies is not over-taxed economies. That is not real capitalism. Real capitalism means having an environment where you have the proper rules, proper safety nets, but you're allowed to move ahead and create things. You don't have to wait permission from the government. You don't get throttled by the government like those entrepreneurs from Silicon Valley going back to Germany, their home country, and finding they can't do it there. They just fled and came back to the U.S. Germany is not, it's somewhat capitalistic, but not very capitalistic. So genuine free enterprise, genuine freedom of people to create is what we're talking about. And when you do that, it produces miracles. Just go back 220 years ago, early 1800s, 9 out of 10 people on Earth were in dire poverty. Definition of dire poverty is today living on 2.5 euros a day in today's money. Imagine what life would be like trying to survive on 2.5 euros a day. Well, 9 out of 10 had to do that 200 years ago. With the rise of free markets, capitalism, industrial revolution, today it's less than 1 out of 10. World War II, huge drop. You see it in India, you saw it in China, huge drop in dire poverty. That comes from liberating people. And we're now discovering, Putin's not going to like this, but a lot of the industrialization of the Soviet Union in the 20s and 30s was possible because of thousands of American engineers, Ford, Motor, and others, building plants. For example, the Koch Industries, the founder of it, built 15 refineries in the old Soviet Union. So it was American capital, a lot of it. During World War II, half of the rails used by the Soviet Union to fight the Nazis came from the United States. So capitalism, we think of it as, oppressive and all that. No, it's liberating from tyranny, if you allow it, if you allow it.
It enlarges the pie for everyone, as
Yes,
they say.
and people find new ways to create the pie.
And that's a good thing. And when institutions weaken, as we see nowadays in the world, do businessmen and businesswomen bear more and greater responsibility to act, to involve?
I think when you have uncertain environments, you figure out where's your real contribution, what is your real talent, and again, we can't as individuals do everything. That's what specialization of labor means. You take somebody who's good at sports. You don't want them spending their day plowing a field to get the food. You want them focused on their specialty. And so focus on your specialty and learn. I mean, you mentioned Apple. Steve Jobs, initially as a young man, was the kind of person most companies would not hire. He berated people, got angry, stole people's ideas, put people down. He was fired from his own company before the age of 30. Then he learned painfully how to become an effective, inspiring leader. He wasn't born with it, didn't have it at the beginning, but he learned. And that's what people have to take. You can learn. And as you learn, you can then do things, particular things better. So life is not fixed, rigid. When you get the diploma from school, that's just the beginning of the learning.
Life's not rigid. That's great to hear. Just a few final questions about Slovakia, very short ones. I'll just shoot them. What is the biggest economic risk that Slovakia underestimates nowadays?
High taxes.
And what is the biggest unexplored opportunities for frontline economics like Slovakia right now?
Not realizing that if you open your economy up, you can become what Switzerland did, what Singapore did, what you once did, become a critical part of the global economy that you'll do very well.
Which mistakes should small economies avoid in the next decade to become and be still relevant?
The mistakes that big economies like Germany made. It applies
That's a good answer.
countries of all sizes.
And despite everything, what makes you optimistic about the future of global capitalism?
Free people. When people are allowed to create, they do. And any time in history you can make a case the future does not work.
My absolutely final question, what is the one message that Slovak leaders should take seriously right now?
Realize government doesn't have the answers, the people do.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you for this conversation and thank you for being part of Forbes Power Players.
My pleasure, my honor. Thank you.
Podcast Power Players ste počúvali vďaka nášmu partnerovi Sandberg Capital, váš partner vo svete private equity.
Vstúpte s nami do zákulisia sveta, kde sa bežní ľudia nedostanú. Iba Power Players. Pridajte si Power Players medzi svoje obľúbené podcasty a sledujte hru zblízka. Celú epizódu nájdete na forbes.sk. Ďakujeme, že nás počúvate.